Next guest is a great writer, and what that really means in the political world is A, she agrees with me, and B, she expresses my opinions better than I could. I'm sorry to set you up that way, Briahna. Briahna Gray is a columnist and senior politics writer at The Intercept, and of course, we've had a number of Intercept folks on the program, and but Briahna has been writing great stuff lately that I wanted to talk to her about. So without further ado, Briahna Gray, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sorry about that introduction. So listen, there were two pieces I wanted to talk to you about. One was, and this is the question of the day, really. Headline was progressive ideas matter to voters, meaning progressive ideas matter to voters. Maybe that should be the emphasis. So why do Democrats fixate on the identity of the messenger? And you were reacting to, among other things, the overall, and I've talked about this, written about this a lot too, the Democratic fixation on let's find the right personality and kind of all line up behind him or her, as opposed to these are the issues we care about, let's fight for them. I mean, is that, first of all, a fair summary of the position you took in writing this piece?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, I was really motivated by a lot of the conversations that were happening around Beto O'Rourke. Last month, there were a handful of articles that were interrogating his record that were somewhat critical of it, and response from kind of the center-left was that this was an attempt by so-called Bernie bros to basically shore up Bernie Sanders' claim as the charismatic white guy. And that somehow the reason we all, or the left supports largely Bernie Sanders is because he is a charismatic white guy, as opposed to someone who has distinct politics, which up until this point were fairly rare among the mainstream political scene. And there were people making all kinds of arguments about, additionally, likability with respect to Elizabeth Warren. And you have all these candidates clamoring to try to capitalize on Ocasio-Cortez's online successes, right, with her social media and how popular she is there, and oftentimes failing. And the response from Ocasio-Cortez herself was, what people are missing out on is that the real core reason that people like me is because of the substance of my message and my leftist, progressive policy beliefs and prescriptions, and you can't fake that sort of thing.
Well, this gets to an issue that has been bothering me for a long time, which is the sort of sense that the leaders and influencers of the Democratic Party, whether it's within the party structure itself or within the media, everybody kind of nods along when somebody says we shouldn't fixate on the horse race aspect of politics, but then it seems like most Democratic influencing figures and a lot of Democratic voters just go ahead and do it anyway. They just say, well, she's more electable than he is. He's more charismatic than she is, as opposed to what you just said, which is, what do I want out of policy? What do I want this country to look like? Who's espousing that? I think I'll vote for them.
Well, yeah, because there's been a fundamental disconnect between the kinds of policies that have become actually very popular, largely with the help of Senator Sanders, who's been advocating for a long time for these things, but who had the national profile to do so following the 2016 primary. So you have things like Medicare for All, which has a 70% approval, 84% approval rate among Democrats, and a slim majority, 51% among Republicans. You have a Green New Deal that has something like an 80-something% approval rate, overwhelmingly popular among both Democrats and conservatives. And so it's more increasingly difficult for the Democratic Party to claim that it's not wise, it's not strategic to embrace those policies. So you have a frenzy around trying to distract people from the fact that the party won't support certain policies, largely because there's a gap between their desire to do so and what their basically donor base wants them to support. That's basically what we're seeing right now, because there's no other logical explanation for why the party wouldn't embrace policies that are both good for people, good for the planet, and good for their personal politics.
Yeah, Briahna Gray, I think you just nailed it. I think that is the problem. And in your piece about this, you quoted, I made some comments on Twitter about it, but you quoted Amanda Marcotte, the blogger, as arguing that, well, here's the quote. The evidence suggests that Bernie Sanders did well in the primaries, not because of his progressive views, but because his voters were attracted to a charismatic white guy they viewed as an... Yes, you're laughing. Right. Now, let me tell you, yeah, I was the head writer for Bernie's presidential campaign, so I was there up close and personal. There are a lot of complimentary words I would use to describe my ex-boss. Charismatic doesn't even make the top 100.
Yeah, look, I have met the senator. I personally find him to have a personality type that I respond to positively. But he is what he appears to be on TV, which is this kind of, he's not a showy person. I don't want to use the word curmudgeonly, but, he's a forthright person with not a lot of artifice about his personality. So the idea that this person whose charm is basically rooted in his authenticity and the fact that he doesn't genuflect for an audience the way that politicians are basically typically expected to do. I mean, she gets the exact opposite read on what Bernie Sanders' appeal is. And I can't speak to what her personal interests are in coming to that conclusion, but I think it's indicative of the kind of the mind warp that kind of establishment figures are caught in, where they will resort to these kind of absurd rationalizations for why voters are behaving the way that they do in order to suppress the reality and the importance of ideology.
Well, absolutely, to suppress it and to continue to pursue the political process as a marketing venture rather than as a debate about the issues. Now, I guess I would also say that, she says Beto is fine. Look, I don't care about Beto in the end, or, what I care about is this process where we're constantly being told what to think and why. And there's a dimension of this that I wanted to raise with you, which is that it seems striking to me, and I think Amanda Marcotte fits into this, but I know I've seen it with other people on social media. The same people who were telling me in 2016 that, enough, no more white males should run for president, which is, there's a defensible argument to be made for that. Suddenly, I saw all of them, or many of them, rallying to defend a white male. And I felt a strange sense of dislocation of, wait a minute, I thought the primary objection to the guy I was working for was that he was a white male. Now you want to, I felt gaslit in a way. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I think I even used that word to describe how I felt in the article, that I feel gaslit. I felt gaslit throughout,
okay.
the entire 2016 primary. Arguably the reason why I am now a writer and not a lawyer as I was 8 months ago is because I started writing as a Black female Bernie Sanders supporter in the primaries who was basically erased and told that I was a misogynist or was secretly adopted by white parents and raised white, and all kinds of crazy nonsense, because the people were so wedded to this script about what could possibly motivate someone to support Senator Sanders. And I think we're seeing a doubling down of that going into the 2020 season.
See, here's what I think, Briahna. And I don't have concrete evidence to support it yet, but I think, number one, that there is, among the very same Democrats who condemn Russian troll farms, I think there's, a concerted social media troll operation. I can't prove it, but I saw a lot of evidence of it when I was working on the campaign, that there's a troll operation in place on social media, as well as a lot of people who've legitimately been taken in by this sort of argument. And two, I think there are a lot of media figures who, for whatever reasons, and I don't know their motivations exactly, but a lot of the same people who are getting briefings, as we later learned from the Hillary Clinton campaign, are suddenly speaking up for another person of centrist political leanings who has like no discernible core values that he would lay down his life for. So I guess what I'm really concerned about is I'm ridiculously optimistic by nature in the long run. There's so many things going on politically that give me hope and inspiration, but I dread the next 18 months because it's just replay time. It's
going to be difficult, but here's what heartens me. I too am optimistic. I think the political moment requires it. I think that, no one's going to be darker or more pessimistic and win out on that end of the spectrum over Donald Trump. And I don't think that's a wise way to go. And my personal ethics and humanism requires me to be optimistic about what our species is capable of. However, I am heartened by the fact that when I talk to real people, in the same way that Bernie Sanders unexpectedly got something like 44% of the primary vote out of nowhere after coming from single digit name recognition in the months before the primary kicked off. When I talk to actual people, when I am traveling, to Kansas or Iowa with Senator Sanders, or when I'm, on the train shuttling between DC and New York and happen to sit down next to whomever I sit down next to, normal people across the political spectrum respect and understand the integrity behind Senator Sanders' message. And they are not caught up in some of these crazy Twitter wars that we are overexposed to. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that if he was able to galvanize the number of people that he did in 2016, coming from behind in terms of name recognition the way that he was, that this time around, a lot of that kind of messaging will have even less traction, that the media will not be able to ignore him in the way that it did, the mainstream media, the way that it did in 2016, and that there's something kind of unimpeachable and undeniable about his message. I'm also heartened by the fact that we now have Ocasio-Cortez as someone who has described herself as, hip-hop artist Cardi B plus Bernie Sanders equals Ocasio-Cortez, right? So here she is, this overwhelmingly popular, charismatic leftist who has affiliated herself with Sanders in the past, and who, in all likelihood, I would assume, endorse him if he were to announce going forward. And I'm really interested to see what happens when all of the people, many of whom are centrist, who like and support Ocasio-Cortez with good reason, are forced to confront the reality that, liking her for whatever superficial identity reason also comes with this package of politics. And they're going to have to disentangle what it means for her to say, hey, I like the old white guy. Now what?
Right. Well, and that gets into Briahna Gray. There's so much we could talk about. It gets into the fact that people who they like Ocasio-Cortez. At one point, I was thinking, okay, if that will satisfy the, in my mind, largely ginned up a conflict between identity politics and class politics. Fine, the messengers can be whoever you want them to be so that we are all together on this. But I feel you're right. There's an internal contradiction in their position that won't last forever. I guess last thing before we go, we won't get a chance to talk much about it. You wrote another piece, What's the Matter with the Democratic Party? Just watch Pelosi and Schumer respond to Trump's wall speech, which was, I do have to say I enjoyed some of the memes that came out of that image of Schumer and Nancy standing elbow to elbow there. I don't know what your favorite one. I think mine was the one that said, it's okay that the car was destroyed. Your mother and I are just glad you're all right. This.
Yeah, I saw that. I enjoyed them all. The thing is, speaking of kind of the identity battles that are going on, I've been told that I'm misogynistic for writing that article, and also that I'm ageist, even though I make no criticism of them based on their age and have been, a supporter of Sanders in the past.
And he's like 300 years old, so right. You can't go wrong. You're covered. But the whole notion, by the way, and I guess I'll close with this. There's a guy who's very much a troll on all these issues. Once a journalist named Giordano. You've probably run across him and he trolls Bernie supporters, and he finally exploded against me when he kept repeating the white Bernie bro theme, and I finally said, you know, you're rendering millions of women and Black and Latino supporters of Bernie Sanders invisible with your comments, which is not a good look for a white man. At which point he exploded. But isn't there actually racism in this act of erasing people like you, like Nina Turner, like Adolph Reed, like all the other people we could name who are wiped out of existence by this Bernie bro deception?
Yeah, my principal concern is not even, Black people like me who have, outlets and a voice and opportunities to articulate their beliefs. It's the everyday working class people who are disproportionately people of color who I talk to, who are so excited about the prospect of a politician who actually is working for their personal interest. When I was with Senator Sanders in Mississippi, I remember him checking into his hotel when we were all waiting for him in the lobby and eavesdropping on two Black women receptionists in the poorest state in the union who whispered to each other as Bernie Sanders went to the elevator, "Hey, isn't that Senator Sanders? Isn't that the guy who's out here looking out for working class interests? Isn't that the guy who cares about working class people?" The idea that Black people, that Hispanic people, that working class people wouldn't be disproportionately interested in a class-based message that attends directly to their material belief is a fiction of the most elite, whitest, out-of-touch order. And that, I think, is the most offensive thing about this narrative.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. And there's so much more we could talk about, but unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. So Briahna Gray, columnist and I guess senior politics editor at The Intercept. Thanks for all the great writing you do. Great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.